About anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me for Point of View today. We're going to spend some time talking about a lot of different topics. First hour, though, we're going to focus on the subject of bullying, a topic that we've dealt with in the past, but we're going to spend some more time giving you some very practical suggestions and suggesting what you might want to do in scheduling a speaker to address this issue in your church, in your Christian school, or your public school. Marilyn Morris is the founder and president of Aim for Success. Her organization has certainly been involved at the forefront of addressing such issues as sexual activity and drugs, as well as now bullying, and she has been in the program with us many times before. Her staff have spoken to more than 2 million students, parents, and educators around the country. Some of the books that she has written: The ABCs of Birds and Bees for Parents of Toddlers to Teens, and Teen Sex and Choices. She's been featured on all sorts of radio programs, and welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Kerby. It's nice to be here.
Bullying. This is one that is a little bit newer for you. Most people, when they hear the name Aim for Success, you've been on many times before. We've talked about sexual activity and premarital sex and abstinence. And then for a while, we were talking about some of the books that you've written on the subject of drugs and drug abuse, but now bullying. But that one seems to be popular no matter where you go, because people are really concerned about what's happening in our schools.
It's a real problem these days, and it starts as young as kindergarten, first grade. We have a number of schools where we're working with the little kids in this.
Wow.
This is new to us because being in promoting abstinence until marriage, we were usually talking 6th to 12th graders. Now we're in kindergarten. It's a whole new world.
I would think so, because when you're talking about at least middle school kids, you can use certain words and you can give them some concepts. But boy, for these little guys, they know that they are being mistreated on the playground, but they really don't even have mental categories yet for some of that, do they?
That's right. And our program for the little kids, the kindergarten through second, is called Super Friends, Superpowers.
That's really good. Well, let's talk about it in a little more detail. And as always, we're going to open up the phones to give you a chance to join our conversation. We're going to give you some examples, but I know that you have really talked about, and we've talked about this in the past, that when you look at bullying, there are really a number of different characters in this play. So take us through the 4 different kind of characters and how each one of them have a responsibility.
You're right. There are 4 major characters when it comes to this. And the first one obviously would be the bully. Mm-hmm. And this is the person who just takes great pleasure in bringing pain to other people. And so if you've got a bully, you also have the person being bullied. We call that the target in our programs. And this is that poor person who comes to school often day after day, and they're mistreated by the bully. Now, the next character is a little unique. We call this the bystander.
The bystander.
Mm-hmm. And most kids fall into that category. The large majority of kids in a school are bystanders, and they're going to call themselves probably innocent bystanders because they often think they have absolutely nothing to do with bullying. They don't bully kids, and they're not the ones being bullied. So they're thinking, I have absolutely nothing to do with this. But they do. They play a major role because so many of these kids are just walking by and looking, or they may stop and laugh. They might even get involved enough that they're high-fiving, whatever, as a bully is taking down their victim. And so we in our programs teach them, you are probably one of the major characters in this.
Yes.
And then the next one is the most important person, and that's what we call the defender.
Yeah.
And that's the person who just has so much compassion for the kids who are being bullied, and they just can't sit back and they have to get involved. And so in our whole programs, what we're doing is trying to move as many kids as we can into the role of being a defender. And Kerby, it's amazing. It's pretty easy to turn bystanders into a defender, but we're seeing over and over that even the targets and the bullies themselves can become defenders.
That's encouraging. Let's work our way through each one of those. The bully. You said they take pleasure in making life miserable for others. I know when we've had June Hunt on this program talking about this and others, lots of times bullies themselves have been bullied. So they live in sort of what sometimes now they're talking about this idea of the new normal. I mean, if you grow up having been bullied by an older child or by a parent, you sort of see that as sort of the basic way you interact with people. True?
You do. That is so true. In fact, let me read you a comment from a kid that wrote us. He said, I was bullied for such a long time. Then I turned into a bully. I have been making life so miserable for so many people in my school. I'm so sorry for what I've done. This was at the end of our program, but that's a perfect example of what you were just saying. Some kids have been bullied so long. Maybe it's what's happening to them at home or whatever. And they come to school and they just need to lash out. It's like kicking the dog, and it becomes their way of life. That's so sad.
And that quote there, I think, illustrates the fact that you have different kinds of bullies. You have some that just think that's normal and don't realize that they're inflicting pain on others, either because they have received that kind of treatment, or maybe they don't have as much typical empathy that they would have because of that. And then there are others that really don't care. I mean, they don't care if you were to tell them that they are wrong, but it seems to me that in some cases the light goes on and they realize in some cases that this is not appropriate behavior, and that's a responsibility for defenders, which could be both students or teachers, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there really are teachers who are bullies, and that can be a problem too.
That's incredible. Well, how about the target? I mean, some bullies think, well, the target asked for it. This is something that they just dress like geeks, or they just don't know how to play, or they're loners, or things like that. It seems to me that the targets sometimes find themselves mistreated because bullies seem to almost have this intuitive sense of who they can get away with bullying, right?
That's a very good point, because typically the bully is not going to go after the 220-pound defensive end of the football team. They're going to look for kids that they're pretty confident they can bring down. And so that's sad for the target in this case. They're being attacked like that.
Yeah. The other one that you mentioned is the bystander. I want to spend some time there because that's your concern. There are so many young people and maybe even teachers that just simply say, it's not my problem. They walk away. Or as you said, sometimes they even high-five each other. So it seems to me that that's really your target for your presentations, isn't it?
It is. And we spend most of our time there. But like I said, we're hoping to move everybody over into the defender role. And I think we're doing it too.
Yeah. Now, when we do that, let's. One of the things we've done here is we have posted on our website here one of your videos, and so first of all, I encourage people to watch that, because what you're really encouraging people to do is be empowered to defend. Isn't that right?
That's right. That's the name of the first program that we did, Empowered to Defend.
And again, that video is about, 7 minutes long?
Right.
And I would encourage people to watch that, because this would be just a great opportunity for people to know a little bit more about what the program's like and to give some perspective on that. So we're going to take a break and come back, and we'll spend a little more time talking about bullies and bystanders and trying to convert so many into defenders. But we also, a little bit later, want to open up the phones. I'd love to get your comments about the problem of bullying. And of course, we've just begun. We have cyberbullying, and we have bullying that has taken place in the public schools, which is where you do a lot of your speaking, but it happens in a lot of other venues as well. So certainly we want to educate you about this issue. So visit the website, pointofview.net. You will see that we have a link to Aim for Success under the web links. We have the video, which I would encourage everybody to watch. It's only going to give you about 7 minutes of material, and you don't have to see the entire presentation, but you'll get a very good idea of the idea of empowered to defend. And then I would encourage you to click on that share button, put it on your Facebook page, and start a conversation. Maybe you have a blog, put it on your blog, or send it to somebody that you think needs to know about that. Perhaps if you have an email of your local public school, send it to them, because they need to know about this too. We'll come back, talk a little bit more about bullying, and then open up our phones to give you a chance to join our conversation. We'll be right back.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Christians have a civic responsibility since we're both citizens of heaven and citizens of earth. Unfortunately, many Christians do not seem to understand that good citizenship involves voting intelligently in each election. Last week, I had Ralph Reed on my radio program to talk about some of the important races around the country. Then I asked him to give us the bad news about how many Christians actually voted. No doubt you've heard the statistics in the past. Let me update the latest numbers from the last election. In 2012, there were 31 million self-identified born-again Christians who voted in the election. That represented about 1/4 of the total 131 million votes cast. That also means that about 17 million born-again Christians did not vote in that presidential election. About 9 million were registered to vote but did not vote. Another 8 million were not registered to vote. Think about what a difference those 17 million votes might have made in the election. Moreover, those Christians were not being good stewards of an opportunity few Christians have had in the past. We have the privilege of electing our leaders. You know, in the New Testament, Jesus says that we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We have a stewardship responsibility when it comes to using our gifts, talents, and opportunities. Jesus also described the importance of this stewardship in his parable of the talents. He was critical of the one servant who buried his talent. We as voters should not bury our talent, but use the opportunity God has given us to vote responsibly. We also need to educate ourselves about the candidates and issues. At Point of View, we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote election resources. There are articles, videos, and a link to an extensive list of voter guides from various groups. You can learn the congressional votes of incumbents and see how candidates have answered surveys and questionnaires. You need to take advantage of these resources so that you can cast an intelligent vote in November. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Topic is bullying today, and if you'd like to join our conversation at any point, feel free to give us a call, 1-800-351-1212. Marilyn Morris with us, and she is the president and founder of Aim for Success. We have a link to the website. We also have a very good video that I would encourage you to watch. But Marilyn, let me ask you a personal question. Were you ever bullied in school?
You know what, Kerby, I really was not. And so it's a little hard even putting together this program at first, thinking no experience there. But then I heard about a guy named Frank. And here's the interesting thing. Frank is 3 weeks older than me, and I heard his story. So here's his story.
Sure.
Frank grew up in the Seattle area, and he had a birth defect. And as a result, he was bullied severely. His tongue did not stop growing, and it hung out of his mouth. Needless to say, he had a serious lisp. He drooled this bloody blackish stuff that would actually cake on his chin and down his clothes. And needless to say, kids were really, really cruel to him. Let me read you what Frank had to say, or has to say about bullying. He says, maybe you're the one who lies awake at night dreading every morning because of the people waiting for you at school or work. They have a name for you. It's not your real name. It's the one they gave you, something that labels you as inferior, ugly, or stupid. And it's their mission to take away your dignity. They pick on you because you're smaller, because you have a rare blood type, because you pick apples or on your way home. You sing a particular song, or you wear a particular sweater, or you can't throw or catch a ball. You can't run fast. You don't have the right clothes, or simply because you're different. And in PE, your oppressors have the perfect opportunity to take advantage of you because you're small or weak, or maybe not so great an athlete. So they push you and shove you and throw you and kick you and trip you. And there's nothing they like better than taking a shower with that bunch, being naked before your enemies, laid bare for them to spot your most intimate physical secrets so they can laugh at you, spread the word about you, and torment you. Those to whom you look for love, shelter, and protection tell you, just ignore them. Just stay away from them. Ignore them? let's be honest. Ignoring is acting and nothing more. Acting as though the words or actions of your oppressors don't hurt. You hear the words, you feel the insults, and you bear the blows. You can act deaf, but the stabs and the arrows pierce you anyway. Just stay away from them? Don't you wish you had that choice? Can you choose which lunchroom to sit in, which squad to line up in, which desk to sit at, which bus to ride home, or which direction to walk? And remember, in PE, everyone is required to shower. Okay, so
Frank.
let me follow on with his story. So all during elementary school, middle school, and high school, he continued to be bullied.
That's amazing.
And
So
it
sad.
all just kind of came to a breaking point. One day when he was in high school, his mom had asked him to go to the grocery store and pick up a few items. So he did. He's at the grocery store. He turns the row and goes into the next aisle, and he's face to face with his bully. And his bully's standing there and saying, "Hey, Frank, what did you need today? Maybe I could help you find something." He picks up a can of deodorant, pops the lid off, and starts spraying it in his face. It gets in his eyes, his nose, his mouth. And Frank runs out of the store, just humiliated. He's so angry, and he goes around the corner and just collapses in the alley. And he's at the end of his rope. He just cannot take this anymore. The next day, he goes to his most favorite class, not favorite, really, PE.
Yeah.
And there must be something about Frank that causes the coach to take a look at him and says, "Frank, how you doing? You okay?" And Frank was shocked because this was the first time in his life a teacher ever asked him if he was okay. And the tone in the coach's voice was so caring and so sincere that it gave Frank this ray of hope that maybe somebody in the world actually cared about him. And this gave him the ability to tell his story. So in the next class period, study hall, he started writing his story. He knew he couldn't tell it verbally very well, but he knew he had an incredible gift for writing, and he started writing his story. And during study hall, he wrote. During lunch, he wrote. The rest of the day, he kept writing. At the end of the day, he had a big stack of papers, and he put them in his coach's mailbox. 2 days later, he walks back into gym again, and the coach greets him with a smile and says, "Hey, Frank, I have a pass for you. The school counselor would like to see you." So he goes into the counselor's office, and the counselor says, "Frank, the coach and I have been talking, and we kind of think maybe it'd be a good idea if you got out of PE, and let's figure out something you would enjoy taking here at school." And Frank says that's the turning point of his life. He got into the drama club at school. He started going to football games. He got involved in school activities. And Frank said that was literally when he began to enjoy himself for the first time ever in his life. And it really makes you wonder, where would he be today
Yes.
if that coach hadn't looked in his eyes and sincerely said, "Frank, are you okay?" But today, Frank Peretti is a New York Times best-selling author. He's sold over 15 million books, including This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness. And he has a book called No More Bullies,
No
which
More
is where I
Bullies.
got this story, by the way.
Very good.
And he's happily married. He loves to fly airplanes. But even Frank himself will say he wonders where he would be today if it were not for that coach who just looked at him and said, "Frank, are you okay?"
What a great story.
It is a great story.
Frank Peretti.
Yes.
Yes, I remember having a chance to interview him shortly after he got some of the visibility for This Present Darkness, before he wrote Piercing the Darkness, some of the others. And unbelievably gifted, but like you said, a good example of an individual that was bullied. And where would he be if there weren't some, we talked about the defenders, if there wasn't some involved adult to say, "Are you okay? Is there something we can do?" and provide an alternative. And you, over the years, have collected a list of a lot of people that we know that are famous, that are bullies. I would imagine most of our listeners would know Frank Peretti, but a lot of individuals that are actors in Hollywood, individuals that are captains of industry, were bullied themselves when they were in school.
One of the stories we tell is about this kid who was bullied all through school because he was tall and lanky and awkward, big ears, spoke with a lisp, and had an ADHD severely, and kids were just so cruel to him. We tell that story at the very beginning of the program, and then at the end of the program, we just tell the students, there are some people that you do know that have been bullied. Maybe you didn't know that. And this particular person I'm going to describe is a great athlete. He won Swimmer of the Year award many, many times. He's gotten all kinds of gold medals. And then we'll say, now, do you know who that is? And they'll say, oh, Michael Phelps. And we'll say, yeah. Remember the guy we talked about at the beginning of the program, tall, lanky, awkward, big ears, spoke with a lisp? It's Michael Phelps.
Phelps.
Yeah.
Just some great stories here. Just before we take a break, and we already have calls coming in. By the way, if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's, if we can, talk about your program for just a minute, because I would suspect that some people would say, I would love for my kids to hear this story. I would love for them to see the entire program, and there are opportunities for some of our listeners to schedule some of these. So talk about what might be available.
All they'd need to do is call our office if they'd like, and get us on the website, phone number, or whatever, and call us and talk to us. Or you can even email, and our office is great at just accepting emails and saying, we'll tell you what it would take to bring us in and all that kind of stuff. And we travel all over the country. We're headquartered in Dallas, but we speak all over the state of Texas and throughout the country. So we'd love to. And I have a speaking staff of 7 speakers, and all my other speakers are young, cute, and all this. They do most of the programs for the kids, and they're just great at speaking to kids.
Well, again, we have the link to aimforsuccess.org, and it's on our website, pointofview.net. We come back, we're going to take some phone calls. We're going to also talk about how we can defend others, and what about the issue of fighting, what parents can do, what teachers can do. Lots that we're going to be talking about, but if you'd like to join the conversation at any point, 1-800-351-1212. Let me also mention that in addition to the video that we have here, Empowered to Defend, which is a 7-minute video, which is produced by Aim for Success. We also have our latest video, which is part of our uncensored book video series, I should say. And this one has to do with what we call Korean Lights. Christians throughout the centuries have lived under every form of government imaginable. So what kind of government is best? And you see such an incredible contrast in this video between North Korea and South Korea. It's based upon an interview we did with Wayne Grudem, who's been on the program with us many times before, author of the book Politics, in which he talks about the darkness, literally not only the physical darkness, but the spiritual darkness of North Korea is such a contrast to the light of South Korea. These were two countries were one country at a time, but they were one culture. But there is a stark difference today between North Korea, which has so little light and economic prosperity, and North Korea, which has so much light and is one of the most successful countries in the world. Visit our website, pointofview.net. We'll have more right after this.
A devastating disease is loose in the United States, dishing out pain and loss beyond measure. The menace is sin. Its debilitating results include faulty reason and harmful attitudes. Our children and grandchildren need you to step up right now and help Point of View make a difference. Kerby and the team have the antidote for what ails us, the good news of Jesus Christ and His prescriptions for all of life and culture. But to distribute this antidote costs about $65 each minute we're on the air. Step up today. Help us deliver the antidote. Give $65 and underwrite a minute, or $130 and give Kerby a platform for 2 minutes. Give online. Use the donate button at pointofview.net or call 1-800-227-1444 or send your donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. 1 minute, $65. 2 minutes, $130. Do more if you can, but do something today. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Marilyn Morris with us today, president of Aim for Success, talking about bullying. We'll get to some more phone calls in just a minute, but let's talk about how we defend individuals, because your goal here is to turn bystanders, even targets, sometimes bullies, into defenders.
Right.
What are you actually training them to do?
The first thing I think they need to do is to figure out who is being mistreated.
Right.
Just open your eyes. I mean, pray that God will open your eyes and see who's out there that really needs to be defended. And you know what? A great verse that goes with that is Psalms 82:4. Rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. I like that verse. Okay, so figure out who it is, and then start going out of your way first to just say hi. For the parents, I would encourage your children to just walking down the hall, you see the kids, say hi to them and call them by name.
Yes.
A lot of these kids are never acknowledged at school other than the bully mistreating them. To pass someone in the hall that says hi to them and calls them by name could really do a lot for them.
That's good.
Okay, and then walk in a class that you know they're going to be in there and go over and engage in a conversation with them, just like you would any other friend. This is going to make them feel very special as well. And then sit down at lunch maybe and have a conversation with them, or better yet, maybe even ask them to join you and your friends to start eating like that would be nice too. We also tell the students in our programs that if you're seeing someone being mistreated, go tell a teacher or a school counselor. And Kerby, this is not tattling.
Yeah, that's a concern I think young people would have.
It is, and they're not going to want to do that for that very reason. But it's not tattling; it's rescuing the kid who's being bullied. So that's very important. And then find ways to just help this person. For example, let's say the kid is really smart and maybe really good in math, and you know that, and you're having trouble in math. Maybe at lunch, just stop by and say, I'm really struggling with this, and could you kind of help explain this to me? You're so good at this. Make them feel significant, and it's also helping you as well.
That is really good. I think that issue of tattling is going to be one that you're going to have to break down the barrier, because, there's sort of this confidence that kids are supposed to keep and not tell the parents and not tell the teachers. But I certainly think that if they can intervene, then they turn from being a bystander into a defender.
Exactly.
Let's take some phone calls. We're going to get into all sorts of other topics, but I wanted to give some of you a chance to tell your story or ask a question. So we'll first head out to New Hampshire. Tori, thank you for calling today. You're on with Marilyn Morris.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I'm very passionate about this topic for many reasons. One being our neighbor, a delightful young man, so bright, could even on the 4th of July recite the entire Declaration of Independence. I mean, the young man was just brilliant, and an Eagle Scout and so forth. To make a long story short, he was incredibly bullied because he was lacking in social skills, but again, very bright, a gift to our world. And bullying got so bad, he took his life. I was one of the first responders. He hung himself.
Wow.
And what a waste to our world, and it devastates to our whole community. And I find a lot of people put so much pressure on the victim that they're supposed to handle this. I love what you were sharing about making others responsible. And I think one of the things we're seriously lacking are the basic morals and values in our world. Our kids are being raised more with technology and the media. They're lacking a sense of heart and empathy. My daughter is a first year at Keene State. You've probably heard about this on the news and the riots that happened. It was a lovely fall day, and the children turned it into mayhem and destroying public property and hurting each other. We need God in our lives. We need basic morals and values from long ago to stop this epidemic that is happening and to save these innocent, brilliant children. And also the ones that are doing the bullying, heal them. Something is clearly broken in them, and they need help, guidance, and direction.
As we've said before, most bullies have been bullied, so it's understandable there as well. So, Tori, I really thank you so much for being a first responder, but also for telling us a very sad story, but bringing a sense of reality to this conversation we have today.
I thank you, and thank you for bringing all of this, all this information and a possible solution to this nightmare that so many are going through. Thank you so much.
Let's talk about those solutions. When you speak afterwards, you do an evaluation. You've already read, I think, one of the comments from one of the students, but it does seem to me that the school districts and other venues bring you in because they want to change attitudes, and it seems like just one talk is enough to change a lot of attitudes.
It really can. My thinking is a few defenders can make a difference, but you get a large number of defenders, it can make a great big difference in a school. Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. But again, she was talking about here a very gifted young man and takes his own life. Eagle Scout, brilliant. And that, I think, is one of the concerns that people have. What do you do? And I think you have already talked about reporting. What about, I'm thinking about the program that always is on at Christmas where he's being bullied and they tell him to fight back and hit. But what about this idea of fighting back? Is that a good idea or not?
Well, I always encourage parents, you need to come up with your own family values and determine how you're going to deal with this. But when I'm doing parent programs or seminars for parents on this subject, I always have a parent who will come up. Usually it's a dad, and he says, my son's been being bullied, and I just told him, hey, next time this kid comes up and gives you trouble, you just rear back and hit him as hard as you can. And he said, and my son did it, and that was the end of the problem. Yeah. And I said, well, that's a happy ending to that story.
Sometimes that works, and sometimes it does not.
Does, Kerby. Yeah. But this is what I want parents to stop and think about before you would encourage your child to do it. Because maybe your child could win this, but there's a good chance they won't. When kids fight, someone usually gets hurt. And if your child is the one being bullied, there's a good chance, or your child has probably a better chance of not winning than the kid doing the bullying. And when kids fight, there can be scrapes and cuts and bruises, or could be concussions and broken bones, or serious problems. Another thing to think about, when kids fight at school, they often get suspended from school, and that can go on your permanent record. And it does not matter that your child didn't start the fight. If your child is involved in the fight, your child could be suspended. Not a great idea. The other thing, this can also backfire, something a lot of parents don't consider. So let's say that your child does what dad said, okay, just turn around and slug him, and he does, and he wins the fight. And all of a sudden, your son is having this incredible surge of power going, whoa, this is great. And he loves the way he feels now. And all of a sudden, he's moving away from being the kid who's been bullied, and he's now becoming a bully. And you as the parent are leaving one problem, and you're walking into a new problem now. Another way, too, that it could backfire is, let's say your child does win the fight, but he's not getting this surge of power. He's just grateful it's over with and hoping that's the end of it. And he's walking home from school. He turns the corner, and there's the bully. But the bully's not alone this time. He's got 3 or 4 friends, and they're out for retaliation. So I encourage parents, think long and hard before you encourage your child to fight. There are other things you can do.
And just again, think about it from the administrator's point of view. Somebody said something to him, and then you hit them. Who escalated the confrontation? The one that you told to hit the bully. So, I mean, there are some real consequences to think that through, and you've taken us through quite a number there. And again, you can go to Aim for Success and find a lot more, but let's go back to the phones and pick up another question here. We'll go to Rhode Island this time. WKRP, Denise, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, hi. Thank you for taking my call. I just want to ask the guest speaker, what do we do about the bully? Because I see that in a lot of topics, people take interest on the bullied, but they never address the bully. So it seems like the bully always gets away with it, and they grow up, and they take that behavior onto the job site, and they start bullying coworkers. So this is something that I feel that needs to get addressed when they start the bullying, which is school. I'm a victim of being bullied, and I'm an older person. I'm an adult, so I know the feeling. I never had the like I wanted to commit suicide or anything like that. I followed that, ignore, and sit somewhere else, but it still hurts. It's painful, the treatment. So unless you're a bully, if you've never been a victim of being bullied, you never understand what a victim goes through.
Wow.
And and I like the question that you asked the guest speaker if she has ever been bullied, and she said no. So she will never ever, no matter how many books she writes, no matter how many speeches she gives, she will never ever understand what we go through when we're going through it.
We appreciate your testimony. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get some other comments and talk about what else we can do to help this situation and to improve it. We'll talk more right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Marilyn Morris with us for a few more minutes, president of Aim for Success. And again, you can go to aimforsuccess.org to find out a little bit more. We also have the video that I would encourage you to watch. But what about this? It seems to me we almost always think about bullying as something that happens in middle school or high school. We're finding, first of all, it starts earlier, but also it seems to actually continue into adulthood in some cases.
It can, Kerby. In fact, bullying often starts in schools in kindergarten, first, second grade, but it usually tends to peak when kids are around 11, 12, 13 years old. But if it doesn't end there, it usually will go on into high school, and those people who continue to bully in high schools will usually continue to be a bully the rest of their life.
Wow.
And so that's the parent who's the bully, or your neighbor who's a bully, or your boss, like the lady was talking about a few minutes ago, that's a bully. And those people can be difficult to live with, difficult to work with. Probably my first suggestion is just a verse from the Bible that says, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And, because that can be a difficult situation for everybody. Sometimes it really helps, though, to just go sit down with that person, if it is your boss or maybe your parent, but for sure your boss or a neighbor, and just say, what you're doing really hurts my feelings. Sometimes that will wake a person up and go, oh my gosh, I didn't know I was coming across that way. That doesn't always work, but sometimes it does.
Certainly does. Let's get back to kids for just a minute. We've already talked a little bit about the need for defenders, and certainly teachers can jump in here, but I'm sure a lot of parents right now are saying, okay, we got a problem in our home. What can I do? Is there anything a parent can do when we're talking about bullying?
Yes, I'm going to share with you 5 social skills that I think would be very beneficial for your kids. And these are so simple, I think the audience could look and go, really? but honestly, kids with good social skills usually are not the kids being bullied, and they're usually not the ones bullying either. So these are so easy, but here's what you can do. First one you want to teach your child to do is just smile. And again, that sounds simple, but a pleasant look on the face helps. And then make eye contact with the person. People who walk around school all day looking at the ground look intimidated. So make eye contact. Say a friendly hello. Call the people by name around you. This all makes a big difference. Now, I'm going to ask the parents to do something for me for a minute.
Sure.
I want you to think of yourself as in your kitchen, and you're talking to one of your best friends. The two of you are having a conversation face to face, and in walks your child. Now, I want to ask you, what is your child going to do when he walks in? Is he going to turn around and say, oh, hi, Mrs. Jones, how are you? Or will your child just walk in and walk right on out of the room? And if your child is that last one, the one that's just going to walk through, there's your first homework assignment. You're going to want to teach your child to recognize the world around them. Turn to Mrs. Jones and say, hi, how are you? And be friendly like that. Okay, you're building social skills. The 5th social skill is to accept compliments graciously by simply saying thank you. Okay, so go back in your kitchen, you're talking with your friend, and in walks your child, and Mrs. Jones turns to your child and says, oh, by the way, I heard you got a really great award at school. Congratulations. Okay, so is your child going to say, well, thank you, I appreciate that? Or is your child going to shrug her shoulders and go, it wasn't a big deal? And you need to realize, if your child shrugs her shoulders and says it wasn't a big deal, that was very rude. Mrs. Jones just paid your child a very nice compliment. They need to learn to say thank you graciously. And if your child can really master these 5 social skills, it'll help them go a long way in life. Think about when they graduate or they're in high school and they want to get that job at McDonald's. If they have these 5 social skills, they're more likely to get that job.
That's for
they
sure.
graduate from college, they've got these 5 social skills. It's going to help them all the way through their life.
One other point I wanted to make is that bullying has been bad enough, but cyberbullying is a new wrinkle to that as well. And again, at Aim for Success, you've got lots of information about that, but share with us just a few things we need to understand about cyberbullying.
Yeah, we let kids help them realize they are the first generation of teenagers in the history of the world growing up with social media at their fingertips. And it's exciting and it's fun and all of that, but there are people who have come in now and made this into a serious weapon. And there are, as the lady was speaking earlier, one of the callers, there are kids committing suicide over this. They can't handle what's being done to them. So what we encourage kids to do, these are some of the comments we share with them in the program. The best response is no response. Just ignore what's happening. And this drives cyberbullies nuts. In fact, there's nothing that will infuriate a cyberbully more than just ignoring the messages. So do that. And if you've already been involved and you've been responding, then stop responding. And you can always try unfriending, removing, or blocking the person, and then report this also to your internet or cell phone service provider. Sometimes that'll work, but sometimes it doesn't. And then if it's still continuing, we don't tell the kids this suggestion. This is what we tell the parents at our parent programs. If it still continues, what we can encourage parents to do is then get involved, not their child, but the parent. And if you know who the the person is that's bullying your child online. Contact the parents and tell them what's happening. Oftentimes the parents have no idea this is going on. And if that doesn't stop, then send a certified letter to the parents with the messages their child has been sending, and do it by certified mail so that you get a receipt and you now know, they know too, that you have sent this message. And if that still doesn't work, then contact an attorney. You could always talk about a civil lawsuit if it was going to come to that. But sometimes just a letter from an attorney will make it stop.
Well, lots of great advice. And again, you encourage people to contact you at Aim for Success. And let's talk about the fact that not only is this the bullying program, the newest program that you have, but you've had ones in the past on abstinence and on drugs and all sorts of risk behaviors. It kind of makes some of our listeners say, do I really want to be a parent? This is that's a really difficult world that we are bringing our children into. But one of the things I know you've tried to do at Aim for Success is help them avoid those risks. So talk one more time about how people can connect up with you.
Okay, so they can reach us at aimforsuccess.org. Our phone number is 972-422-2322. They can call us, email us, whatever they want to do. And we'd be happy to talk with them more about how we could come into their school, their churches, and present these live 1-hour presentations. We always have parent programs. We like to speak to the parents even before we speak to the kids. Help the parents know what we're going to be saying, but give the parents lots of ideas to go home and work with their children in these areas.
So again, and the video is about 7 minutes. That's something that you would encourage not only parents to watch or children, but you could forward this on to a school administrator if they're interested and want to know a little bit more about what it's going to look like.
Right.
Well, lots of great opportunities. And again, I appreciate you being on the cutting edge of all these risk behaviors that are affecting our kids. So thank you for joining us again today.
Thanks, Kerby.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll spend some time getting into a couple of other issues. One is video games, and that's certainly a very significant challenge. And then Eric Metaxes will drop by. He's got a new book out called Miracles, but he's also been writing quite a bit lately about how these sermons by Houston pastors have been subpoenaed by the mayor, and I know he's going to want to talk about that as well. So we have a lot more to cover, but if you'd like to get some more information about some of the things we've talked about today, visit the website, pointofview.net. We have this particular video, 7 minutes long, Empowered to Defend, and that is one of many videos we're going to be sending you to. And also, I just announced that we have now posted another video, and this is really asking the question, what type of government do you want? And makes a very stark contrast between North Korea and South Korea. It's done by our good friend Wayne Grudem. It is the audio from an interview that we did here, and we've put some pictures with it and some video that will help illustrate this even better. Once again, we encourage you to go to our Facebook page or to our YouTube channel to watch that. Click on that share button and share it with others, because it's an important question, especially during this election season. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about video games, and then we'll hear from Eric Metaxes. All that coming up right after these important messages.
The Point of View radio talk show is broadcast 2 hours each day, but you can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. There you'll also be among the first to see our new videos, Uncensored, a series highlighting issues impacting this generation and the next. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. @PointOfViewRTS. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Together, let's go viral. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, we're going to spend some time now talking about video games, and one in particular as we talk with the Tornado Twins. If you know who those are, I don't need any further introduction, but for the rest of you, we're talking with Ruben and Efraim Meulenberg, and they are known as the Tornado Twins. They are identical twin brothers, and they have been very much involved in all sorts of technological activities, to put it mildly. They serve on staff of Saddleback Church in the Technology, Communications, and Marketing Ministries, and have been, through their materials, training individuals over the years in the use of these kinds of technologies, including games. So, Tornado Twins, thank you both for joining me today here on Point of View.
Yeah, thanks so much for having us. Yeah, it's amazing. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Well, and we certainly would encourage people, if they're unfamiliar with you, to go to our website, and we have a video which is so creatively well done. You go in there to try at first to explain to one of these video game moguls that we need to do a video game on the Bible, and he goes nuts. And then, of course, then you give some of the background. So if people are not familiar with the project, or you, they get a chance to see that. Also, of course, we have a link to Tornado Twins to the Kickstarter campaign, and I'll let you guys figure out who gets to speak first, but one of you, tell us a little bit of the story about this idea of the Game Bible series.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is Efraim, and when we were about 12 years old, we started making video games, and back then we already had the idea of doing the Bible, but we know we didn't have the skills, at that point to do it. So we've been working on that, going to the right colleges and picking the right education, and moving to the right country, if you will. From that point on, we grew up in a youth ministry, started noticing that reading is going down over the last 30 years, and people consume their media in different ways. But, however, if they're interested enough, they'll still pick up a book, and so we thought a video game with the Bible can do exactly that. It re-engages kids in the stories of the Bible and helps them read the Bible for themselves again.
A lot of young people are into gaming. As a matter of fact, they've said that the millennial generation has a higher percentage of gamers than any generation in history, which is due in part to the technology, which, as you said, has improved dramatically, but also just to kind of the culture around that. So you see this, I guess, as a way to encourage young people who have said, well, I don't really want to read the Bible, it's not that interesting, to say, there's a lot of action that I did not realize was in the Bible.
Right, absolutely. We've been to many story writing trainings in Hollywood, for screenwriting as well as we did film. And the funny thing is that even in the most secular training, the Bible is referenced every time again, because it has the most interesting stories. And in Hollywood's perspective, they work, worldwide. And Hollywood is trying to reverse engineer of why do the Bible stories work. And we of course know why, but Hollywood tries to make that into a story training. So there's a lot of respect for the Bible, across entertainment, and that's very interesting. We hadn't expected that high of yeah. And generationally, it used to be 20 years ago that kids were the only gamers, but now parents are gamers as well. Male and female are equally as much into games as other people. So it's a widely accepted phenomenon that we've seen in our efforts as well. Yeah. Now, the average age for gamers in America now is 35.
Yes.
Yeah.
Changed rather dramatically. What I want to do is maybe talk a little bit about your current project, but then get into maybe some suggestions and concerns and warnings for those that are involved in video games. But let's for a moment talk about this idea, because you're in the midst of a fundraising campaign, and I'd like to at least let some of our listeners know what they can do to find out about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We noticed that families are looking for wholesome content, and kids are consuming so much media these days. They're looking for media that also, gives the Bible and puts it in a good light. So that's why we started the video game of the Bible, and we started a Kickstarter campaign for it. And the fear though amongst the Christian community is we've seen so many cheesy Christian media products and also video games. Will this be a good game? And so what we're trying to do is to really make a very high quality game, using some of the top artists who worked on Star Wars and many of the Lego games out there, and ask people, through the Kickstarter, will you stand behind this? Will you, stand up and fund this? Because, of course, you can go to a publisher and they'll say, we'll never do anything with the Bible. And we've had those discussions over the last 7 years. Yeah. And so that's why we're, working on Kickstarter.com. People can, check the project out if they go to thegamebible.com. And that way, if families say, we want this, if kids say, we want this, and, that's how we raise the funds to finish the game from its current point on.
Yeah, thegamebible.com, and we also have a link to Kickstarter, so a lot of it is on our website. And you have a few video clips which are helpful, because I think both of you are kind of surfacing a question that's in the back of some people's minds, and that is, okay, how, can I use the word cheesy is this going to be? How poorly produced is this going to be? Those of us a little bit older, I'm old enough to be your parents, we remember seeing some of these Christian films and going, oh, boy, I can't, do we have to put up with one more of those? And then over time, the production values improved dramatically in those films. And a lot of people said, I'm having trouble now telling which one came from a Christian studio and which one came from a secular studio, or which one had a Christian director, which one had a secular director. And I think video games are sort of in that genre as well, that you've actually honed your craft well enough to make this worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. The funny thing is, for hundreds of years, Christian art has been the top art, from the Da Vinci's to, what have you. And it's a little bit sad that for the last couple of decades we've seen some cheesy stuff coming out, and that's not how Christians have been traditionally throughout the ages. And indeed, it is a really great and a joyful thing to see that rise in quality coming. We want to do that for video games because it's the most popular art form of our time. And it's just, it really needs something good.
Well, and again, I think it'd be something that would drive young people into the Bible, because they might say, I didn't know that was in there, and go back and start reading some of these stories that are part of the Old Testament in particular. And, of course, you're starting with David. I mean, you can't have a more exciting figure and central figure in these video games than the story of David, which is a very extensive one that you're going to be working on first.
Absolutely, yeah. The first game covers the story of David from shepherd boy to king, and so we call it David: The Rise of a King. And so you start off with him. He's watching the sheep. There's bears and lions, those kinds of things. Slowly, you get into touch with the Philistines. You run into Saul. He anoints you back in Bethlehem with your father and your brothers there. Sorry. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And and then slowly you rise, but also Saul starts to get jealous and starts to hunt him down. And so there's a lot of gameplay in there that is very great as a video game. That's unique to the story of David. Yeah. Other stories that, of course, our goal is to do the whole Bible, but right now our focus is on David. Sure. Other stories we offer, for example, what did the Garden of Eden look like? Those kinds of things. That's a much tougher subject. Yeah.
Sure.
A lot of research.
Let me take a break, and we'll come back. We'll get maybe a little advice from you as well about video games. We have lots of parents that are saying, okay, how much is too much, and are there some concerns that you might have, and are there better video games than others? How we make choices about that? Lots of very good questions we're going to ask, and we'll continue that conversation with the Tornado Twins right after this.
The Point of View Commentary with Kerby Anderson.
Christians have a civic responsibility since we're both citizens of heaven and citizens of earth. Unfortunately, many Christians do not seem to understand that good citizenship involves voting intelligently in each election. Last week, I had Ralph Reed on my radio program to talk about some of the important races around the country. Then I asked him to give us the bad news about how many Christians actually voted. No doubt you've heard the statistics in the past. Let me update the latest numbers from the last election. In 2012, there were 31 million self-identified born-again Christians who voted in the election. That represented about 1/4 of the total 131 million votes cast. That also means that about 17 million born-again Christians did not vote in that presidential election. About 9 million were registered to vote but did not vote. Another 8 million were not registered to vote. Think about what a difference those 17 million votes might have made in the election. Moreover, those Christians were not being good stewards of an opportunity few Christians have had in the past. We have the privilege of electing our leaders. You know, in the New Testament, Jesus says that we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. We have a stewardship responsibility when it comes to using our gifts, talents, and opportunities. Jesus also described the importance of this stewardship in his parable of the talents. He was critical of the one servant who buried his talent. We as voters should not bury our talent, but use the opportunity God has given us to vote responsibly. We also need to educate ourselves about the candidates and issues. At Point of View, we have our Pray, Organize, and Vote election resources. There are articles, videos, and a link to an extensive list of voter guides from various groups. You can learn the congressional votes of incumbents and see how candidates have answered surveys and questionnaires. You need to take advantage of these resources so that you can cast an intelligent vote in November. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Ruben and Efraim Meulenberg are with us today. They are known as the Tornado Twins, born and raised in the Netherlands, and serve on staff at Saddleback Church. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. They'll be with us for a few more minutes. Perhaps you have a comment or question about video games. And I wanted to ask both of you a little bit about some warnings that you might have. I understand that the game Bible series that you're putting together is really going to kind of be in the fashion of the Mario Brothers or Rayman games. So you're not going to have gore and violence and those kinds of things. Obviously, there is some violence in the Bible, but you're going to do that in a tasteful way. And even in this first episode with David, the rise of a king, these episodes are going to involve fighting off some things. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge that some video game producers have really over-the-top kind of violence, and they have mature ratings. And I think you probably would have some things to suggest as parents as they begin to think about allowing their children to watch some of these games and play some of these games.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are two extremes. One extreme is well known, and that's the violent side. You know, some developers are famous for, wanting to push the gore limits and going in slow motion, and chopping people into pieces, and that really gave video games a bad name.
Sure.
And if you look at the amount of games that are published like that, it's a very small portion of the industry, but they get a lot of press, and so we feel that just like with any genre, it may be better to avoid those. Another one that's lesser known are the games without ending. And we would want to warn a little bit about those as well.
Okay.
in the recent 3 years, there's been a strong change in the games industry where the free-to-play model has come out. And what those games do is they draw you in for free and then use a really well-shaped peer pressure method to keep you playing without end. So these games have no ending, and they try to make money off of you. And with the mobile space, getting bigger, you see a lot of those coming up. So when you were looking at what games does your child play, look for games that have a clear ending. And oftentimes story games, are those. And they have better values, and there's teamwork and camaraderie in those type of games. And when that game ends, it ends. There is no constant.
Although there's of course definitely nothing wrong with those games. It's everything in life comes in balance, and when things come out of balance, and you're gaming 6 to 8 hours a week or a day, then that is probably the model you're following. Yeah,
sure. And that I'm glad you brought that one up. Fee to play, because some cases they're just soaking you. It's like the old 900 numbers and some of those kinds of things where they try to keep you going and try to drain your bank account. And so I've talked about violence. We've talked about those. Another theme that's of concern to some parents is the occult theme, and that shows up in so many of these games, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Demons and witches and witchcraft and warlocks and those kinds of things. It seems to me that, again, if you're a Christian parent, you have to just evaluate not only whether or not it's violent or bloody, but what kind of worldview is behind some of these games as well.
Yeah, exactly. When we were younger, we'd go to the library and pick out a few books, because that's what we had in those days. Mm-hmm. And so our parents would always browse through the book before we were allowed to check it out. So there are websites out there like what Focus of the Family does and those kind of things, and Relevant, that they have review websites where you can check out what a game is about or what a movie is about. And it's definitely thoughtful for parents to do that. To see kind of the themes of the game. Yeah. But what we have as a sort of a measurement stick, if you will, is we like to research who made the game. Because if you don't really want your kids to hang out with who the developer is, then do you want them to hang out with the work they made? Yeah. So that's kind of the way we like to simplify things. But then review websites are an excellent method as well.
Yes, and again, those reviews are available in a lot of places, so people can find out those. And so that's one other key point. You mentioned just a minute ago the number of hours. I think even good video, whether it's television or computer games or video games, can be misused when you spend too much time in front of a screen. Yep. So any thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I think too much of anything is too much of anything, right? And we see that with video games as well. And right now, those are the most popular medium. But for instance, a friend of ours leads a small group of teenagers, and one of the kids kept bringing novels, and it was really really fun that he reads, but he was doing it during group time and had to be asked stop reading. So any medium where you get sucked in too much, it's not a bad thing as a parent to say, okay, now let's take a break from that.
Yeah, I think so.
Did that as well. Yeah.
I think a little bit of a digital fast occasionally is a good idea, because we have a whole generation that's wired, and it's almost like you go into a bedroom and you've got sometimes a TV in there, sometimes you have a computer in there. If nothing else, they have a cell phone in there. They may have a video game in there. It's kind of like a 24/7 news operation, and I think there's time to get away from some of that. And it's kind of like a 24/7 entertainment center, and some of that is, again, anything in large doses is not a good thing. But help parents out here that are saying, okay, maybe you've convinced me that video games aren't so bad and all the rest. I know you're going to be releasing your series on multiple platforms, but if you were talking to a parent who has some kids that have been saying, I really want to watch these games, I want to play some of these video games. Matter of fact, we're going to have a game Bible series that we can put on there. But the parents say, how do I go about making that selection on which platform? Can you give them any advice there?
Yeah, platform is really a matter of preference. Some people are, since the average age of gamers is higher, oftentimes the parents game, and they want certain games on Xbox, so they'll buy an Xbox that the kids can use, or they want to play certain games on a PlayStation, so they'll, buy a PlayStation. In our case, the game is pending approval from PlayStation, so we don't know yet if they're going to allow us on their devices. That's still pending. But it's going to be for Mac, PC, and Linux right away as well. When it comes to the larger platforms, Nintendo and PlayStation and the Xboxes, our technology is ready for it to be used. But the games industry, it's going to require a little bit of prayer because traditionally, most platforms have said no to anything that has anything religious in it.
Isn't that amazing? That's just amazing.
So that's will require some prayer. Yeah, this goes into every small detail. For example, some games were changed by publishers because for example, if you walk through like past a tombstone, the tombstone would have a cross on it, and they made it change it to RIP, for example. Even small symbolism like that has been banned from consoles before. So it's going to be this is going to require a bunch of prayer to see if they'll allow a game of the Bible on their platforms.
Well, let's again encourage people that are interested, and I suspect a number of people would like to know a little bit more. There's some ways in which they can connect up with you, and we've provided that. But again, thegamebible.com, and then we also, of course, have the Kickstarter link there as well. And if people want to ask you some more questions, maybe we've piqued their interest, but they're saying, okay, I just need to talk to these guys a little bit more. Can they find a link at one of those websites so they can communicate with you?
Yeah, they can email to Ruben, it's RUBEN, at tornadotwins.com. And we even answer our emails personally. So we'd love to hear from them.
Yeah.
Okay.
We do get a lot of emails, when we started this thing, all of a sudden we got about 300 emails from pastors that are excited about it and stuff, so which was a complete surprise. So it takes us maybe a little while to get back to you, but we'll do our best.
Okay, so again, tornadotwins.com. We gave the gamebible.com, and of course we have the link there for Kickstarter. So I think we've covered it pretty well, and I appreciate you guys giving us some time today to talk about this, and we would love when it's all out to do another interview. So thank you so very much for giving us a preview of what's going to be coming up.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have in studio with us, I believe, Eric Metaxes, and this will be an opportunity to talk with him and, of course, to give you a chance to ask any questions or make any comments. His new book out on miracles. He's got a link that we'll talk about where if you pre-order it today, you can get it for 50% off. Not quite sure how they've done that, but that is really good. The video that we just mentioned a minute ago with the Tornado Twins is there. And, of course, the video that we announced earlier that we have part of our series, the Uncensored series, the one called Korean Lights, about the contrast between North Korea and South Korea and the real significant importance of government. What kind of government do you want? I think you're going to learn quite a bit here, and this will certainly have an impact on your view of government. So we encourage you to watch the video, but don't stop there. We're just weeks away from a very important election, so we would encourage you to share this video with others. And it once again reminds us that the votes that we cast in less than 2 weeks do have an impact, and we certainly can see the dramatic difference between North Korea and South Korea. So again, encourage you to visit the website pointofview.net. Click on that one button there for the video, or you can go to our Facebook page and find it, or of course you can also find it at the Point of View channel on YouTube. So lots of ways in which you can connect up with us. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk with our good friend, Eric Metaxes.
Historically, when a person testifies in court, he is asked to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. He is not to lie, not to leave anything out to make someone look better, and not to add extra details which point away from the truth. Kerby Anderson and the team at Point of View bring you the truth. It's not an easy job. It takes effort. But that's why when we discuss issues, we probe, we question, we reason, we dig. And to do that, we need partners, individuals who see the value in digging deeper, who give generously to buy us more and bigger shovels, so to speak. Is that you? We'd like to hear from at least 24 people in the next 24 hours. Dig deep. Give $30. Give $60. Just give. Click the donate button at pointofview.net. By phone, you can dial 1-800-227-1444 or send a check to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas, 75221. Join our digging team. $30, $60. Give today. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Kerby Anderson.
Well, as I've been announcing, we have in studio with us Eric Metaxes. Those of you that would like to not only listen but watch, you can go to our live stream right now. He's in studio with us, and he has a new book out, Miracles. But again, if you're not familiar with Eric Metaxes, how could you not already know who he is? Author of such books as Bonhoeffer and Wilberforce and on and on. I will go through all those books. But again, he is also giving commentaries every week in Breakpoint, and is an individual that has done Socrates in the City, this new book on miracles. Eric, I just can't believe all things coming out.
Well, I'm I've been busy.
You have been busy,
but I'm very, very excited about this book. I guess people generally say that about whatever book is the latest one, but this is different. I've never done anything like this.
Well, let's just mention that you sent something out to a lot of us that get your emails last night.
Yeah.
That if people pre-order this right now, and we have the link on our website, pointofview.net, it will take you to Books A Million, and they're making this available. This seems intuitively bizarre, actually. 50% off. You can get the book at 50%
This is a freaky 24-hour promotion. They do this thing called a flash sale. Nobody else is doing it, not Barnes & Noble, not Amazon. It's Books A Million, and the link is at your link, at my Twitter, whatever. But this is a 24-hour, 50% off sale. It will never be cheaper. I can promise you that. It's just incredible. They do this for reasons that are unknown to me, but I'm telling all my friends, purchase your Christmas gifts today. You'll never, ever get it at 50% off. So I'm really happy. We didn't plan for me to be on today when it was 50% off, but I'm glad your listeners at least can know about it.
I knew you were in Dallas. You said, can I come on? I said, I think we can fit you in. We did. And certainly this is a great opportunity for this book. And it is 50% off just today. And it's not through us, but it'll link you. And you can either go to ericmetaxes.com or, of course, at pointofview.net, either one. And I do want to spend some time talking about it, but I've just got to, since we have been for the last week talking about Houston and what has happened to the pastors there. And most of our listeners are familiar with the fact that the mayor, Anise Parker, has demanded and subpoenaed not only the sermons, but all the communication. And so last week he wrote a piece called Hand Over Your Sermon or Else. Then yesterday, a line has been crossed. And even when I knew I was going to have you on last Friday, I said, I've got to talk to Eric Metaxes, because an individual that has written a book about Dietrich Bonhoeffer has to probably see some similarities between what's been playing out.
I despise the fact that I see similarities. It makes me sick that in the United States of America, a time would come when something would remind me dramatically of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and of the Third Reich's treatment of the church. And we've had a lot of bad stuff. The HHS mandate is terrible. There's been all kinds of terrible stuff. But this is different. And I want everyone who's listening to know, at least in my opinion, a dramatic line has been crossed. This is a new day when a government official in the United States of America would dare demand sermons from pastors, even just the idea of the optics of it, the idea that a government official would be insensitive and to be able to treat pastors that way. It's a stunning thing. And what I've been saying is that the parallel is dramatically similar to the very early days of the Third Reich, when the church, this is the key, had no clue what was happening except for Bonhoeffer, really. And so people like Martin Niemöller, who got it pretty soon, in the beginning they didn't get it. And once they got it, the church they would send the Gestapo to just sit in the church to listen to them preach, to kind of intimidate them. And this is what happens, is you have a chilling effect. Once the government says we're paying attention to your sermons, it affects the way people preach. They start, once that happens, that's the beginning of the end of religious liberty in America. And so this is such a big thing that I've called on every pastor in America, send your sermons. If they're asking for sermons, let's all send our sermons to show solidarity with these pastors. Send your sermons to the Houston mayor's office. I've posted the address on my Twitter, on Facebook, and on Breakpoint. Go to breakpoint.org. Please go to breakpoint.org, because we've got it all there. But the other thing is, I've told every believer to send a sermon, send scripture verses, or send a Bible. Because the Bible is the Word of God, and we have to tell government officials, we must tell them that in the United States of America, we have freedom of religion, and this book and what comes out of it is not subject to government oversight or regulation. God forbid. This country has had religious liberty for over 200 years. We've taken it for granted. today, we can't take it for granted. So I beg anybody who's listening, please take this seriously. Mail the mayor of Houston something, pray over it, send it in love. But for goodness sake, and for the sake of America, please send something. If we don't register this with them now, if the church, what I have said dramatically is that if the church does not stand now, there is no American church. We're effectively defanged and defunct. If we don't respond to something this brazen, we can't complain when 5 years from now we're not able to say anything.
Got some great information that we have linked to ericmetaxes.com as well as the Breakpoint commentaries. You can go to breakpoint.org. And, of course, we'll also be talking with Mike Huckabee because he has some ideas about what to do. But just before we get back to your book, one other point, and that is the Manhattan Declaration.
Yes.
I've had John Stonestreet on here, and he said, when Chuck Colson had abortion and same-sex marriage, that seemed pretty good. But he had a section here on religious liberty, and thought, why do we have that? Well, every Friday, as you may know, we have a program that we do on religious liberty, and whether it's Kelly Shackelford or, of course, yesterday we had Louis Gohmert, or whether it's Jay Sekulow or whoever it is, we talk about these religious liberty issues. And Eric, even looking over what's happened in the last week, sometimes we have more stories than we have time to cover.
It's unbelievable.
Something has happened.
No, this is why I want to say to the church, we have to wake up. And I say this, the dramatic thing is that Bonhoeffer in his day was trying to get the church to wake up, and they did not. They woke up, some of them, 10 minutes after it was too late. They could do nothing. The image I always bring, it's like Gulliver being asleep and being tied down by the Lilliputians. These tiny Lilliputians are putting these little ropes, and at any point, if he wakes up, he can just stand up and, no problem. But at some point, there will be enough ropes tying him down that he cannot stand. And the question is, will he wake up before that's the case? That's the case with the church today. Will the church stand? If we stand, it's no contest. There's so many people in America who care about this stuff. But if we remain asleep, eventually these laws, these things will cripple us. We will not be able to stand. Bonhoeffer did not succeed in getting the German church to stand up. And by God's grace, the American church will stand up before it's too late. But I'm just begging everybody listening, please take this very seriously. I hate to be serious, but sometimes you got to be serious, and this is serious.
Eric Metaxes with us, and if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. New book out, Miracles, and what they are, why they happen, how they can change your life. And let's just talk about how this can be a real opportunity to get this message into the mainstream, because a typical book like this, lots of times they stick it in the religious section, and that's great, and I find a lot of Eric Metaxes books in the religion section, but I think I've heard you say that they're thinking about giving it a lot more publicity this time.
Barnes & Noble has said that they're going to put this front and center in their stores for November and December, and I just want to tell the world that is not normal. To have a book with a chapter on the resurrection and to have biblical content, quoting C.S. Lewis and Chesterton and all these folks, to have that right in the middle of Main Street, so to speak. You walk into the store and the book is there. That's a rare thing. And it's an opportunity, from my point of view, for evangelism. It's an opportunity for believers to share something with non-believers that will open up a conversation. If you look at the book, it just looks like like an Oprah Winfrey kind of, angels, whatever. Of course it's not, but I want it to be inviting. I want people who have questions about life, about the nature of the universe, to say, what is this? What is this? And so I go into all kinds of stuff, the relationship between faith and science. Is there compatibility between faith and science? And just and the second half of the book is a whole bunch of miracle stories from people that I know personally, so I can attest to their credibility.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll take some phone calls. I see some calls coming in, so if you'd like to join us, Eric Metaxes with us just a little bit longer, 1-800-351-1212. Let's talk about some of our action items. First of all, we talked about his Breakpoint commentary. We've posted a couple of them. Hand over your sermon or else a line has been crossed, and his suggestion that you may want to send something to the mayor, Anise Parker, and I would encourage those of you that are pastors, send a sermon. Of course, we've already suggested that if she really wanted to hear the sermon, she could come into one of the churches, but you can send it to 901 Bagby Street, Houston, Texas, and that address is actually on his commentary, so you can find it there. The new book out, Miracles, and it's one of those phenomenon that only happens occasionally, and that is today. We have the link. If you pre-order it, you get it for 50% off. That's only through Books A Million, and so Eric wanted you to know about it. We wanted you to know about it. Let's take some phone calls when we come back from the break. 1-800-351-1212. If you need any more information, of course, that web link there is to ericmetaxes.com, and you can find out more about his book, Bonhoeffer, which is there, about his upcoming Miracles event and the release of the book, as well as all sorts of other things related to his schedule, his writing, and much, much more. So go to ericmetaxes.com, breakpoint.org, and, of course, pointofview.net. Let's take a break. We'll take some calls right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Eric Metaxes in studio. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. New book out, Miracles, and I would certainly encourage you to order some, 50% off. I'm thinking of making a massive order just for people in ministry and things of that nature. You're never going to get it any cheaper.
My friends, trust me on this one. I know you will never get it. In fact, not only won't you get it cheaper, you'll never get it 50% off again. They don't do that. This is some freaky Books A Million promotion, so please take advantage. It's midnight tonight. It's over, so it's 24 hours. If you want to get it anytime between now and Christmas, get it right now. So
Sounds
God bless you. Yeah.
Let's take some phone calls. We'll go to Andrea. I think you wanted to talk about his previous book, Bonhoeffer. What would you like to say?
Pastor, Prophet, Martyr, Spy, WLGP. Is that a relevant read? I think it is. Seems like our church in America has become somewhat materialistic, and too much of the world is in there. And of course, that is what happened in Europe, I think. And homosexuality is another thing that is plowing in there. So I just wish you would share a little bit with me about that book. Isn't that the book that you've written on Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Prophet, Martyr, Spy?
Well, yeah, I wrote that book, came out about 4 years ago, and thanks for your question. I have to say, the book, unfortunately, is completely relevant. I wish it were not relevant, and I'm not kidding. I wish it were not relevant. I wish there was nothing going on in America that the slightest parallel to what went on, in the Third Reich with regard to religious liberty. But I'm sad to say the parallels are dramatic. They were dramatic 4 years ago. People kept saying this to me, but they've gotten more dramatic. And the church has to wake up. That's the ultimate story of the Bonhoeffer book, that he was like an Old Testament prophet trying to get the people of God to be the people of God, not to play at being the people of God, but to actually be the people of God. That's always the case. God is trying to get his people to be his people, and the church in America needs to be the church. And so this is why I'm banging the pots and pans trying to get the church to wake up, because eventually it will be too late. And so this is dramatic. Anyway, thanks for that question.
She said that about homosexuality, too, because a lot of the Breakpoint commentaries, John Stone Street writes about that quite often. You do occasionally. And I mentioned the Manhattan Declaration at the centerpiece of that. You had abortion, certainly homosexuality, and religious liberty. But the two kind of connect. It seems like every advance of the so-called gay agenda, we see a retreat of freedom of Christians, whether you're a baker, a photographer, a florist, a minister, whatever it might be.
And this is religious liberty. In other words, in this country, I think we've been very generous. We basically say to people, do what you like, right? You have liberty to do wrong, that I can think and say stupid things if I like, right? And that includes my view on sexuality. I hold to a biblical view of sexuality. Some people think that's stupid. Well, that's fine. The question is, do I have the right to my views? And in America, at the very heart of the American experiment is the idea of liberty and religious liberty, and we are genuinely losing sight of the centrality of that to the American experiment. And so as far as I'm concerned, the sexuality issue is just, it really is significant as it relates to religious liberty, because we can talk about that all day long. But when the rights of people to express themselves freely, and that's the key, freely, without any fear, when that is abrogated in the United States of America, this is a different country. And so I want people to be aware of that.
Let's go to state of Texas. Bill, thank you for calling today. You're on with Eric Metaxes.
Yes, and I appreciate that. Thank you. I just, is it any wonder that Satan chose Texas, the central part of the United States? This is a spiritual battle. Has nothing to do with the physicality of life in itself, but if he probably feels like if he could win there, then he could win anywhere. This is a call to arms for men and women of God to pray, to seek out God and his help and his guidance, and get involved in the spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle for the life in the body of Christ now. And we need to, are there 50 righteous men in the state, and I'll save it, from God. But we need to pray. We need to be involved in the spiritual battle.
Well, this sounds like a true or false question. I'll be honest with you. It is true. This is a spiritual battle. And let's face it, any battle that's a real battle is a spiritual battle. We have to be prayerful. But I want to always caution Christians. Sometimes Christians want to be activists and they don't pray, and other Christians, all they do is pray and they say, I don't need to do anything. And it's like God usually calls us to do both. Right. And that's why I'm asking people to send letters, to send sermons, to send Bibles to the Houston mayor's office. Please consider that. Please get your kids in Sunday school to write cards and with a scripture verse. This is something that we need to say. We are here. We care about religious liberty. This is sacred. Do it prayerfully. And those of you who are prayer warriors especially, please pray. This is a spiritual battle, as this gentleman has just said. This is a spiritual battle for the soul of this nation.
And we had talking about prayer yesterday with Jim Cymbala, of Brooklyn Tabernacle was with us, and but he would also say we also pray and we set a guard and we do a lot of other things. We get involved, and we certainly recognize during this election year to pay attention to some of those issues. So those are a couple of issues that we've already talked about. But just before we leave, I want to talk about how people can use this book, Miracles, because this, I think, could be a real good evangelistic book to your unsaved friends.
That is mainly why I wrote it. I said to myself, look, we're not having a real conversation about these things in America. What we typically do is, maybe people of faith believe this stuff, and then the rest of the world kind of scoffs at it.
Yeah.
That's not right. Most normal people have questions. Is this all there is? I remember before I became a Christian, I remember thinking, is this all there is? And I would have been happy to see the devil, because then I would have said, okay, I know this is not all there is, and if there's a devil, then I know there's a God. But I was actually thinking, maybe this is all there is. Maybe there's no spiritual world. Maybe there's nothing beyond the natural. To really ask that question, and to ask it honestly, not to just say answer it simply, but to ask it honestly, to think about it, that invites non-believers into a conversation. Because guess what? This is not... we're not just standing up for our tribe like it's a sports team. I want to get people on my side. I don't care. I care about what is true.
Right.
If what we believe is not true, let's jettison it immediately. But is it true? Can we talk about it? Can we reason about our faith in the way that we reason about anything? I believe we can. At least we can to a great extent. And I think believers need to do that, because it emboldens your faith. When you see, I got to tell you, writing this book strengthened my faith. When you understand that how God fine-tuned the universe. Now, you know about this, Kerby, because I know you've written about it, but this stuff, it's mind-blowing.
Yes.
It is mind-blowing. I talk about the creation of the moon. I never knew about this. It is one of the freakiest things I have ever seen. I said, if you know this, how can you not believe that a God created all this? There is no chance, none, that this just happened. But I didn't know that. I got to be honest, I did not know that. And so I want to share this stuff with believers and non-believers, because it will, if you don't have faith, it will certainly challenge your lack of faith big time. And so will the stories in the back of the book. You read them and you just go, okay, this person, it doesn't sound like they made it up. It doesn't sound like they're crazy. What could have happened? So I want to challenge people to think, and I hope that this book does that. It's gotten terrific response from all kinds of people that I wouldn't have even expected it from. So I have great hopes.
Well, again, talking about the miracle of the universe, is life a miracle? Some of the miracles that take place, the resurrection, it's just going to be a great evangelistic opportunity. And Eric Metaxes, I know you have had a busy day, but thanks for dropping by and saying hello.
Always a huge pleasure. Thank you, Kerby.
Let's come back and do it again, but we are out of time. One last time, in case you have just joined us, Eric has found out a way that you can pre-order the book at 50% off. It only happens today, and it's not something we're doing, but it's going through, I guess, Books A Million. So that's a way you can find out about it, and I'm going to do it. Hope you might do it as well. Want to thank Andrew and Catherine and Chris for the help behind the scenes. Have a great day, and we will see you back here tomorrow.
At dinner recently, I was struck by the couple in front of me. They were allegedly spending a night out together, but the only time they communicated in a half hour was one time when the man showed what was on his phone to the woman, and then back to their own screens. We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You'll find us online with your phone, your tablet, your laptop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues. You can also follow our new YouTube video series, Uncensored. Stay informed. Follow us on Twitter at Point of View RTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Again, at Point of View RTS. We'd love you to retweet us, to share our Facebook posts, but please don't do it when you're out with your family or someone you love. We can wait. We're online 24 hours a day. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.